Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supergirl. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, obviously, first and foremost, there is the whole situation with Nixley trying to get the next totem, the Hope Totem that is at The Hague. She rolls up and tries to take it. Obviously, luckily, John and Kara show up, but not before she causes too much issue because she ends up stripping everyone there, a lot of the leaders that are going back and forth between the two countries, of their courage, and that inadvertently leads to big international issues. But it wasn't enough time for Nixley to get the Hope Totem, and Kara tries but can't get it out because like Hope is kind of her thing, but it's very like sword in a stone King Arthur type of situation where she just can't pull out because basically she needs to create a piece that's everlasting and burning like the sun, brighter and burning everlasting like the sun or something like that. I'm butchering it, but obviously for Kara, she kind of has no idea of like really how to do that because obviously as like a Supergirl, she tries her best every day. But then Lena actually kind of gives her an idea. Well, I think, yeah, Lena gave her the idea that like, right, Supergirl does a lot of good, but Kara takes that good news and then writes it in a way that, you know, kind of breaks it down for people in a way that, you know, makes it an easier message to get across than, you know, because maybe from Supergirl's perspective, it's probably like a little like, you know, it's like, it's from a superhero's perspective. So if you can able to break it down from like on a personal level as Kara can, then I think that's what they were trying to get across. Sadly, that didn't work either. And it's actually interesting because I think a lot of the episode kind of wore down Kara's hope. Because for her, it's like, especially when she was trying to help Esme, which we'll get to those sides of things, but when she was trying to help Esme, like, control her powers and everything, and she was hearing, like, the terrible side of things, and it's like, right, like, I should have stopped, because it's like, that's the drawback to their powers, of like, yeah, you can hear a lot of beautiful things, but the sad thing is, you can also hear a lot of the terrible things in the world, too, and that's a lot for a little girl on her own to handle. That, you know, that probably had to be like the roughest. I mean, could we see that firsthand with like Jordan, like on Superman and Lois going through that? But obviously, like Clark had to go through that. Kara had to go through that. Like, you know, yeah, she was a little bit older when she came into. I mean, to be fair, like Jordan's a little bit older going into his powers, but it doesn't make it any easier. It just, you know, so. But especially because when she was like writing what she was writing, and even Andrea's like, "Oh, this normally isn't yours." It's like, yeah, but like William's more focusing on like the villain and just like what the Super Friends are up against and trying to stop. I want to focus more on the positive, you know, the good in the world, which Andrea was like, there's no good in the world. I'm like, geez. It's like, wow. Like, it was just interesting to have her having that pessimistic point of view, but it's understandable. Like, I'm a pessimistic too. Like, I like to call myself a pessimist with optimistic tendencies. It's kind of how I like to refer to myself as. But I was like, wow. I mean, also it explains like why she, because to her probably like she looks at the world like, oh, the world's terrible. So that's probably also leans into, well, plus like the business set like her mindset probably that she acquired from her dad, like a lot of that's probably what fuels that too, because it's just like, right, why she views the news is like, it's all bad news. It just depends on how you can spin it, just enough to get people clicking on it. So get some like sensationalist like headlines and stuff like that, or good words that will attract people, get clicks, more money, sure. But it's like for her to have that perspective at the head of a company that like puts out the news too, is like, oh, it's like, that's really fascinating that like you would have. I mean, I'm not saying like there aren't people who probably like work at news stations or whatever, or newspapers that decide like have a very like negative point of view on certain things, but it's on the world. But it's just like interesting because Kara's like, yeah, like the world, there are bad things, but she's like, the world, there is good in it too. Because that's the thing of like, because it's like if we focus so negatively on the world view, like, and I think that in itself can be a commentary on the news. Because for a lot of people, it's like, man, a lot of people don't watch the news. I tend to not watch the news because it's so depressing. Because it's like negative story, negative story, positive story, negative. It's just like that's been my experience, and I don't know. You know, I don't, like I said, I don't watch the news consistently enough to know like maybe certain networks try to spin it a little bit where it's just like, you know, not so negative news and then some like it's just when just like, and it's just like when it's kind of, and it's not just news networks. I mean, it's blasting your face everywhere. I mean, that's the powerful beast that social media is. So like, it is kind of an interesting and complicated thing of like, when all you see is the negative stuff, you're going to like lean into like the pessimistic side of yourself, being like, oh yeah, the world sucks. There's no good in it, but there's good in it every day. It may not always get the highlight, and that's why Carr wants to highlight it, you know, hoping that it will inspire hope in people. But even that wasn't enough, and Carr's stopping crime, saving people, saving cats, even helped that little girl with her ice cream situation. But yeah, it just wasn't enough, and Carr doesn't know what she can do. Because Lena was suggesting, especially because the two countries are going head to head about like, because despite John being there to kind of ease things in, which Secretary Brown is kind of like, she almost playing a little bit of an Amanda Waller there in that regard of just kind of like, yeah, whatever, you soup, stay in your lane. She almost had that, that actress looks familiar too, who plays Secretary Brown. I was like, I know her from something, I just don't remember what. But regardless, it's a situation of, that's not the actress who played, oh God, I'm blanking on her name. That's Freya's significant other in, the Vampire Diaries universe. That's not her, is it? I'm blanking on her character's name. Is that the same actress? I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't know if that's her. It's been a while since I've seen the end of Legacies. Because that's the last time she pops up. She pops up in the final episode of Legacies, but I'm like, it's been a while since, I'm not Legacies, but the originals. I'm like, I don't remember if that's her or not. Might be, maybe that's why I recognize her. Regardless, tangents and all that aside, Lena was kind of coming from the perspective of like, right, you need to get, like, it'd be like, oh, easier just to wipe out like all the nuclear weapons, but it's like all the missiles that they would fire at each other. But Kara doesn't want to, because that would be, yeah, like, she intervenes here and there and kind of doesn't, like, you know, everything last time is like, that's because it was all for the sake of stopping a villain, but it's like, she tries not to affect things on too much of a world scale, because it's like, yeah, she has a lot of power and she can do a lot, but she doesn't want to use her might to kind of, like, make nations bend the knee to her. It's like, no, like, that's the whole point of free will. Like, we're trying to, like, instill this world, like, with free will and stuff like that. That's freedom. And they're like, I don't want to take that away from you. And that's also the thing why, like, the secretary was like, can't you just use your powers to make it? He's like, no, that would be taking away free will. She's like, yeah, but that's the far-going conclusion that, you know, given enough time, if that magic hadn't gotten involved, they would have. It's just like, John's like, we don't know for sure that it's a far-going conclusion that you would have been able to resolve everything. But also, it's like, if the missiles come to it, like me and Supergirl, my friends, we can stop it. But it's just the thing of imposing your free will, like your will upon others, can have dire consequences. It could trickle out in having many outcomes. But ultimately, considering where things are, especially when Nixley decides to kidnap William, for the sake of trying to lure in Supergirl and use him as a means of, hey, bring me all the totems or William gets hurt. But Kara couldn't do that. And obviously for Lena, it's like, well, the charm she's trying to put on the totems, it's only more of a zap, but it's like, it might be enough to change the tides. Because, you know, it's like finding Nixley and Mitch and William, like, was proving hard for Brainy, so like there was no luck on that front. And obviously the magic front isn't finding a permanent solution to stop Nixley from using the totem. So Kara decides this time she is going to intervene. Then even if it means like kind of affecting human history, it's like it's already being affected by a Nixley's magic. So it's like, fine, I'll step in if I need to, if I have to. Then. And so her and John respectively go to the different countries and like gather up all their missiles that they're planning on firing. And obviously I like Kara saying like, I'll take Catherine, you know, got a soft spot for him. I was like, oh, that's nice. You know, it's like R.I.P., you know, Red Daughter, you know, because obviously like that was her home and that was so important to her. So I like the wink and nod to that. But it's interesting too, because at that time, like, you know, William is with Nixley and she kind of opens up, because it's so, I find it so fascinating that she's criticizing like Kara, but like, oh, you're this powerful being and everything. And it's like, oh, everyone's heroing you as this hero, but it's like, oh, they're naive, like those in power. Like, it's like, if she just let me get all the totems, like I'd up and leave. But it's like, yeah, but then you'd go and conquer another world, and who's to say you won't come back and just decide to conquer this one just for, I mean, you are going to have because it doesn't just affect the fifth dimension. Like, her getting the All-Stone would mean, like, having power over all reality. So it's not just her getting what she wants. It's like, you can't let anybody have that much power, you know, at their disposal, especially someone who's dead set on revenge like Nixley is. And that ends up being an interesting, you know, thing for William, like, when because it's like, oh, you're naive to, like, believe your little newspaper. Because, like, I guess in the fifth dimension, there's no such thing as, like, free press. Because it's like, yeah, like, those who have power, like, kind of control everything. And it's unbelievable that you think that your words can mean anything. But words matter. They can change things. They can topple people in power, just because it's like, if you're able to expose them and hold them accountable for what they've done, it is possible. Once again, it just comes down to, like, two major people, Nixley and Andrea, being like these very, like, having these very negative perceptions of, you know, I think their respective situations and environments they grew in kind of allowed for that in their mindsets. You know, Nixley just kind of thinks of the worst of just people in general just because of her dad. It's like, yeah, my dad, what did he do when he got power? Like, he corrupted everything. You know, so, and even William's like, you believe, like, after all the chaos that you've ensued, that what you're doing is that you're getting justice. And she's like, yeah, like, because she's so blinded with, like, because she thinks she's so focused on her being right that it doesn't matter who else has to pay the price for you just to be proven right. So it's like, I mean, who's to say that you, because once again, I know there's a storyline and the comics, because I remember reading this years ago when I was reading about Mixopilly. I cannot say his name. Mixie. I remember there's actually a storyline where he's actually king of, like, the fifth dimension or something like that. I read like a little bit about it. Like, I didn't read the comic itself, but it was like an older comic, maybe it was more, but I don't know. It was like a super depressing ass story of just, like, him getting the throne and just, like, losing everything that mattered to him. And part of me almost feels like that would be almost like Nixley's, like, in result of, like, yeah, you get everything you want, but it ends up not being what you want. It doesn't fill the hole in your heart. Getting revenge against your dad, you know, or your brother, like, because I think if you look at the totems, they're trying to probably prevent her from getting all the power and going down that route, because what the courage totem showed her what she had to do to overcome it, you know. But luckily, by getting rid of all the missiles and, you know, inspiring so many people by stepping in that way, Kara was able to get the Hope Totem, but obviously not wanting to give it to Nixley, so they set their plan in action, and it's charmed, and by the time it gets to Nixley, it hurts her, but she grabs onto William, and it's like, I love that, like, William's like, yeah, don't I get a say in this? And he sweeps the legs, he grabs the Courage Totem, and luckily, Kara was able to get him and the Hope Totem before Nixley popped off. So now they have all three totems, but then it comes a conversation of, should we just, like, we're playing Nixley's game of catch up because we're waiting to find the other totems so that Nixley can then it turns into a whole battle over the totems. So it's like, wouldn't it be better if she doesn't have all of the totems? If we destroy one, then it's fine. But then it's like, yeah, but these are magical elements in the world, and if we destroy them, we don't know what the consequences will be. We've seen what will happen without people's humanity. We've seen what will happen without courage. And so Kara's like, then Hope. We'll destroy Hope and face whatever consequences happen, because we have no, like, because we had the power to bring back home, you know. It might be harder, but we've shown that we can when the time comes. So they sacrifice that one totem at the very end of it all, and it gets to, they throw it into the sun, which obviously puts a wrinkle in Nixley's plan. But then someone sends her a special watch and everything. It's like, oh, from a secret admirer, and so she puts it on, and it turned, like, the moment it's like a secret admirer, I was like, okay, so we are getting what I thought, like her and Lex joining forces, which Lex is just waiting for his moment, just like he did during Crisis on Infinite Earths. He's just waiting for his moment to snatch up all the power. It's like, no, oh, Nixley, I'm with you. Oh, I'm all about it. I'm going to let you collect all the totems, and I'm going to snatch them and make it for myself, and I'm going to be the one with all the power. So my question then becomes, is he going to recreate kind of a totem of, I'm curious, because every place in the universe, every planet and everything like that has its own totems. So I'm wondering, would either he's going to recreate the totem of hope, or not unless he plans on popping onto I was about to say, like, well, where the state of the multiverse is, continuity-wise, there might not be any other Earths, technically. Once again, they haven't really, like, yes, the other shows in the DC universe exist, which we know they take place on different planets, but they're not really, like, acknowledging, like, at the end of the Crisis, like, they haven't fully acknowledged, like, yeah, the other elements of the multiverse are bad. Because I feel like if any show was going to do that, like The Flash would, but they haven't really said that in the past 2 seasons, like, about, like, the state of the multiverse, like, everything's that's taking place on this Earth Prime. So I guess, like, in a grand scheme of things, technically, the multiverse hasn't, like, pulled back out yet. Technically, I guess, like, every other show is technically, like, far into the future or something like that of their respective Earths. Maybe that's a technicality behind it. But, like I said, they've never, or maybe it's just kind of a far-going conclusion of just like, yeah, it's happened and just no one's talked about it yet. Maybe that's all it is. But because part of me was wondering, like, would he just pop onto another Earth to get, like, their hope totem? But I was like, would that technically work? That'd be like matching, like, Infinity Stones from different, like, universes, which obviously that's a whole thing. Like, that's a thing in the comics, but not necessarily in the MCU. That's a whole conversation of, like, that wouldn't work in the comics, I think, but it also maybe could work in the MCU. I mean, we do know now, like, the Infinity Stones differ they're a little different depending on what dimension they're from. Regardless, I thought that was just something kind of in the back of my mind, but it's like, yeah, the pseudo armor at the end makes it pretty clear that it's definitely your boy, Lex that's behind this. And I was like, how many episodes are left? Because we've only got, like, what, 5? 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, 5. So, I was thinking, I was like, oh, maybe this is just 100%. And there's the Lex setup. Okay, there we go. Like I said, he's going to help you just for the sake of, I'm going to help you get the totem so I can get the totem. So, so that kind of worked out there. Well, so we'll see how that plays out. But on the other side of the episode is the most adorable thing ever. And I love that Alex is kind of getting nervous. She's painting, like, that Martian Guardian on Esme's wall. And obviously, Carl flew home to get, like, all the, like, stuff, like, some stuffed toys from, like, Eliza that made her feel good from home. And so it's like, it was super adorable. It's like she gets to be Aunt Cara, Mama Alex, Grandpa John. I was like, this is amazing. And then Esme shows up and it's like they're doting over her. I'm like, and that little girl is the most adorable thing ever. Holy crap, dude. And just so she's like, oh, I'm John. And she holds out her hand. It's like, nice to meet you, John. And it's like, they had to, because even later on, it's like, even Alex refers to her as like a innocent little ball of cuteness. It's like that little girl is too damn adorable. That's amazing. And now I wasn't clear what her powers were last episode, but now they give you a better understanding. Her power is mimicry. She mimics the powers of those around her. So she accidentally mimics John's power and kind of phases through the wall. He was able to grab her. And so obviously they're going to try and help her, like, understand her powers. And she's kind of scared, like, right, I'm sorry if I'm, like, am I in trouble? It's like, no, you're fine. You did nothing wrong. These are just your powers. We're going to help you. I love that she immediately realizes that Kara and Supergirl are the same, because she was like, hey, Supergirl's got the same powers as your sister Kara. Oh, you guys are the same. It's like, right, we got to keep that hush-hush. That's, no, it's just like, we can't let anyone know. That's kind of like a secret of ours. So I thought that was pretty dope. Also meeting everyone else, meeting Lena, meeting William, and meeting Brainy. And he's like, yeah, like, I know, like, I have a friend like this, and we had another friend, and he mimicked that friend's, like, anti-gravity abilities. We were stuck on the ceiling for, like, it took us, like, 3 hours to get down. And she's like, oh, he's funny. And he's like, cool. Like, so, do you know Kaluan mathematical equations or something like? He's like, have you been trained in hand-to-hand combat? I love it. Apparently, they tried to get her to copy, Brainy's powers with the calculations and stuff like that, but it became overwhelming. So they tried Kara's power, which I talked about earlier, but that became a little overwhelming, because that could have gone sideways in many different regards. Luckily, it was just the hearing they tried first, because it could have been like, oh, the supervision or the flying. Well, she's going to be around Kara a lot, so it's like better her to get associated with that pretty quickly. But Alex is beating herself up because it's like, right, I pushed Esme too quickly. Like, I should have known to take a step back. Because from her perspective, it's like, my mom was always the kind and understanding person. And, like, she was always there for Kara. She was who Kara needed. And that's what Esme needs right now. And, Alex wants to be that type of person. She wants to be that type of mother, but she's kind of scared, like, oh, like she's worried about doing and saying the wrong thing. She was saying that the entire time. But Kelly knows after talking to Esme, like what's really at the heart of it is that she's afraid that her powers are going to hurt somebody and she gets sent away again, you know, because apparently it happened in the past. And that's what's at the crux of it. Because I did like that that, you know, Kelly tried to be like, yeah, but Eliza and Kara argued. I mean, didn't you tell me about that time she was so mad at Eliza that Kara almost burned down the house with heat vision? So it's like, yeah, but Kara was a teenager, and, you know, Esme, she's an innocent little ball of cuteness, you know, so. But they brought the truth seekers so that they could appease, like, Esme's, you know, things, so that, like, it's like, you won't, so that you know that we're telling the truth, and it's like, we will never give you back, you know, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, you're stuck with it, because they're in that probational period of just kind of testing things out, and after 6 months, they can permanently adopt her, so, but they also bring it up too, like, right, like, I think it was Kelly that's like, if you decide to never use your abilities, we're fine with that, choose, like, whatever, like, is comfortable for you, like, obviously, like, the Truth Seeker doesn't fix everything, but, like, you know, they're still a work in progress, and it's like, being a parent obviously brought up a lot of insecurities for them, like, obviously, because Kelly as a therapist feel like she should be a lot more on top of this, and obviously, Alex, you know, insecurities about feeling like she's going to fail as a mother, but it's like, honestly, it's all worth it in the end, being there for each other, and being there for Esme, and I'm like, this is the most adorable thing, like, you know, I can't wait to see what the future holds for this family, you know, where things kind of end up with them by the end of the season, but I thought that was pretty dope, so, just a cute angle, just to kind of end off the episode, which, oh, I mean, well, this discussion in the episode, considering, like, well, potentially Lex and, Nixley are joining forces, and what that means in the grand scheme of things, so, it's I'm definitely excited to see where the next episode ultimately ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.